Right now, we are watching history being made, and most Americans do not even realize it. Countries like Kenya, Sri Lanka, and Panama are no longer taking loans in dollars. Instead, they are switching to the Chinese yuan. The changes are quiet, but the reasons are loud and obvious. The dollar, once seen as the unshakable foundation of the global financial system, is losing trust. Under Trump, the cost of borrowing went up. Investors began to worry, and holding dollars now looks like a risky bet. What we are witnessing today is the beginning of a global panic. Imagine this: if a country piles up large debts in dollars, any jump in the exchange rate turns into a financial blow. A simple fluctuation can make servicing that debt several times more expensive. Leaders around the world see this risk, which is why more and more countries are shifting major infrastructure loans, roads, ports, railways, from dollars into yuan. In Chinese currency, borrowing costs are lower, payments are more stable, and the risks of collapse are easier to control. And the latest reports only confirm it. The trend is accelerating with each passing day. Meanwhile, in the heart of American industry, the downturn is already visible. From the Rust Belt to the Midwest, factories are cutting production. Jobs are disappearing. Payrolls are shrinking month after month. Moody's has confirmed the worst fears. At least 1/3 of U.S. states are already in recession. New Jersey, Illinois, Pennsylvania, once pillars of American industry, are shrinking rapidly. The numbers are grim, and the downturn keeps spreading. So, Donald Trump promised he would make America great again, appealing to nostalgia for the age of factories and mills that are now fading into history. But instead of a golden age revival, it has become clear how fragile the system really is. What was sold as a renaissance is looking more and more like a prolonged collapse. In farm regions, the damage is obvious. In Iowa and Nebraska, soybeans that once filled ships bound for China now sit unwanted in silos. The crops are not spoiling because of weather, but because the biggest buyers have found other suppliers. And it is not just agriculture. States that once symbolized industrial strength are sliding into recession. Moody's Analytics reports that more than a dozen states are shrinking. New Jersey and Illinois are already in the red zone. In the Rust Belt, the steel corridors from Ohio to Michigan are losing jobs at a pace not seen since the crisis of 2008. Factories are closing, shifts are being cut, and workers who were once promised stability are lining up at unemployment offices. Corporations are not faring any better. Coca-Cola shut down 5 plants in just 5 months. Stellantis, Jeep, and Ford laid off thousands of employees. In Ohio, steel mills that briefly came back to life after the first tariffs have gone quiet again. In Michigan, auto plants are cutting orders because retaliation measures have hit exports. In Pennsylvania's coal towns, revival was promised, but mining is falling, and cheap renewables are pushing American energy out. Cities that once stood as symbols of American power, Detroit, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, now look hollowed out. Poverty, crime, and a shrinking tax base. This is not just about the economy, it is about culture. The image of the American worker has been turned into a slogan, while in reality, those same workers have been abandoned. Retraining programs are underfunded, labor unions are weakened, and entire communities built around a single plant or mine are on the verge of disappearing. Politicians may wave flags, but a flag does not pay the mortgage. The question is growing sharper. What happens when an entire generation of workers realizes the dream they were sold was an illusion? But the blow does not stop at the factory gates. When industry falls, freight carriers lose contracts, and small businesses wither and die. From diners to repair shops, housing markets are collapsing as families leave in search of work. These towns are turning into economic ghost zones, written off by Wall Street and forgotten by Washington. The pain spreads across the country. People everywhere are cutting back on spending, consumption is plummeting, household debt is rising, and trust, the fuel of the American economy, is evaporating. Families are not saving money by choice. They are being forced to cut spending because rent, groceries, and utilities swallow up wages that hardly grow at all. This is the real price of tariffs. The blow is coming home, and looming over all of this is an even greater threat, one Washington prefers not to talk about. As America weakens, the rest of the world looks at the dollar and increasingly asks, why should we keep trusting it? For decades, the dollar was more than just money. It was the backbone of global trade. Governments, banks, corporations all relied on it because they trusted it. If you needed to raise capital in Nairobi, Budapest, or Buenos Aires, you turned to dollar markets. That was the rule, and it shaped the world order. But that order is collapsing. Over the past year, countries from Hungary to Kenya and Kazakhstan have begun moving away from the dollar and borrowing in Chinese yuan. They are issuing panda bonds in mainland China and dim sum bonds in Hong Kong, and all of it is in yuan, not dollars. These are not tentative experiments but a large-scale shift. Data shows that since 2024, yuan-denominated borrowing in developing countries has surged. Some governments are going even further. They are converting old dollar debts into Chinese currency. The consequences are enormous. For 70 years, the global financial system rested on eurodollars, dollar loans and borrowings outside the United States. This gave Washington leverage over nearly every country, but now the foundation is cracking, and the cracks are spreading fast. Look at the numbers. In just a few months, the dollar has fallen nearly 10%. For a country with a debt of $1 billion, that is not a small adjustment. It is a national crisis. Payments suddenly become tens of millions more expensive. Budgets buckle, and economies teeter on the edge. And more instability lies ahead. The Federal Reserve, under pressure from Trump, is preparing new rate cuts, possibly another 50 basis points. That could weaken the dollar by another 5 to 10% in the near term. For countries already stretched thin, the dollar becomes a moving target no one wants to chase. Now compare it with the yuan. Interest rates on yuan loans hold around 2.4%, less than half the cost of dollar credit. The currency itself remains stable, backed by powerful exports and Beijing's strict controls. A vivid example is Kenya. By shifting a significant portion of its infrastructure debt from dollars to yuan, it cut servicing costs almost in half. That means real savings, new projects, and predictable budgets. This is the quiet strength of China's financial strategy. While Washington wastes energy on tariffs and threats, Beijing offers what many need most: cheap, safe, and stable financing. And countries are not just listening, they are signing contracts. The irony is that Trump's tariffs were designed to corner China, but in reality, they have only strengthened Beijing's role in the global financial system. The US is losing its status as the world's banker, and the yuan is gradually taking its place, bond by bond. And this financial shift directly affects negotiations. Washington tries to project strength, but the leverage once provided by the dollar is slipping away. Trump's chief trade negotiator, Scott Bessent, is flying to Beijing with a long list of demands. But the reality is simple. America has almost no cards left to play. Washington threatens to impose 100% secondary tariffs against China for continuing to purchase Russian oil. On paper, this sounds like a show of strength. In reality, it is recklessness. Doubling tariffs on Chinese goods will sharply drive up prices in the United States at a moment when families are already barely making ends meet. Inflation remains high. In August, the Consumer Price Index rose by 0.4%, one of the sharpest jumps in recent months. New tariffs could send the cost of everything skyrocketing, from electronics to household goods. China, meanwhile, is playing the long game. As US trade shrinks, Beijing is redirecting exports to Europe, Africa, and Southeast Asia. Shipments there have grown by more than 20%. China is not standing still. It is building new markets and strengthening alliances that bypass Washington's pressure. This is the reality. Tariffs, designed as a weapon of pressure, have boomeranged back home, hitting America itself. The dollar, for decades a symbol of strength, is losing trust. Families bear the costs of political games, towns are hollowing out, and the world is seeking new anchors, more and more often not in Washington, but in Beijing. And the central question now sounds different. If America cannot protect either the dollar or its own citizens, can it hold on to its place in the world? The answer to that question will shape the global economy in the decades ahead. So subscribe to the channel to follow every new twist in this story. See you in the next episode.